Neighbor from Hell, part 29. Fred moved out. He removed all of his belongings from his actual unit, all of his belongings from the side of the house, and he left the key inside the apartment. The apartment was left unlocked, as I mentioned in my last video, and Steve and I had decided to not lock it just in case my landlord didn't have an extra key and needed to get back in. So this is still September 6th, 2024. That night, around 7 p.m., I hear Fred's front door open. And again, you guys have seen the proximity of our units, so I can literally hear everything that goes on next door. We shared a wall. And immediately I just know it's Fred. I'm like, he's back. And I was actually doing laundry at the time, so I had to, I think I showed you guys, like when I went outside, whenever I go outside of my apartment to do laundry, I walk past his window, and there's no avoiding that. Like I have to walk past his window when I'm doing my laundry. So I walked past his window and I could see right into his apartment, and I blatantly could see that there was a light on in his bathroom. So I text Steve and I'm like, oh my God, I think Fred is back. And Steve was like, yeah, I can see that there's a light on in his apartment. So when I come back to my apartment after like grabbing my laundry or whatever, I can hear that there's water running in the bathroom, and it's the shower. So somebody's in there taking a shower. I'm pretty sure that Steve told me that he saw his light on until around 10 or 11 p.m. that night. Although I did not personally see Fred. I mean, come on. Like he had been moving boxes all day, packing, whatever. I'm sure he came back because he needed to take a shower. As I told you in another one of my videos, he was homeless as soon as he moved out of the apartment. Like he had nowhere to go, no place to live. So at this point, considering Fred has turned in his keys, he is, I don't know, I guess trespassing, loitering, squatting, breaking and entering. Like, I don't know. I mean, he's not supposed to be on the property anymore. I do not believe he slept here that night. I think he just showered, hung out here for a few hours, and then left. But either way, Steve texts landlord about it the next day, tells him the situation, and landlord basically, I believe Steve told me that landlord told Fred that if Fred came back onto the property, the police would be called. The next day, September 7th, 2024, landlord's ex-wife, Brittany, I think that's what I named her, I don't know, but either way, landlord's ex-wife, Brittany, shows up the next day, and she has come to change the locks on Fred's unit. So she shows up with a locksmith. Also made sure to lock the windows because the locks on the windows had been removed. And again, I don't know if Fred did that intentionally. Like, I don't want to necessarily imply that. They could have fallen off, or maybe he just took them off to open them. I don't know, whatever. But she puts the locks back on the windows. She changes the locks to the unit. And we have a really brief conversation while she's here. And, you know, she says something to me along the lines of like, I can't believe he came back. Like, this is just so crazy. Like, who would do that? Again, I don't remember if this is exactly how it came up in conversation, but I think she was like, yeah, it's just so crazy that he would come back, especially after being evicted. And I'm like, what? Evicted? She's like, well, yeah, I mean, you know, he could no longer pay his rent, so he was asked to leave. And when she said it, I could tell that she was like, oh fuck, I probably shouldn't have said that. Okay. Once I heard that information, that obviously changed some things for me, because I was like, got it. Remember when my landlord texted me and he was like, if Fred is not out by end of day September 30th, I'm going to have to officially file eviction proceedings. And I was like super weirded out by that, because I was like, but he's already leaving, so like, why would you do that? But now it makes a lot of sense. Also, one really quick thing that I think I forgot to mention to you guys was that Fred told me that, so remember how landlord made him pay a double security deposit when he moved in? Fred told me that he was not able to pay his September rent, and landlord was like, okay, I will take like the first half of your security deposit and put that towards your September rent. And then I think landlord was probably like, but since you can no longer pay your rent, you need to be out by the end of the month / October 1st. So I don't think Fred was ever officially evicted. I think he was just asked to leave. Essentially my landlord was like, well, if you can no longer pay rent, you can no longer stay here, and you got to be out by the 1st of October. I think that's what made Fred find this other job in Oregon. I do believe that that was a real thing, because again, from what he was telling me about it, like there were a lot of details that he was telling me about this job, and it sort of seemed like it would be a lot to concoct that. And I know that Fred is obviously kind of a peculiar guy, but I don't really think that he was a liar necessarily. So at least I hope for his sake that that was a situation. That because he could no longer pay his rent here, he found this other opportunity in Oregon and was then moving. Then landlord's ex-wife Brittany was like, every single time I would run into Fred, he would literally chew my ear off for like 45 minutes and tell me some sob story. And I like just could never get away from him. You know, I hate to say this because, look, like again, he was a nice guy, but clearly this was a thing. And also, you know, living here as like a woman by myself, I wasn't necessarily scared of Fred coming back because I never thought that he was a violent person, but he had clearly become a desperate person, you know? I mean, if you're evicted, whatever you want to call it, from your apartment, you turn in your key and then you come back to like still shower and use the facilities, like that to me is obviously not the best decision-making skills, right? So although I was never scared of Fred, I was, I don't know, I guess a little uneasy about the situation because I knew that he was in a desperate spot, if that makes sense. So once they changed the locks, sometime, I believe on September 7th, later that day, I get a really angry text from Fred saying, thanks a lot for ratting me out to landlord. Now he is withholding the remainder of my security deposit, and thanks to you, Stella and I are now homeless and left on the street. And of course, there's like a lot of emotions that are going through me when I receive this text. I think when I first got it, my initial reaction was I felt really bad and really guilty, but immediately afterwards, I was just really fucking pissed. As I mentioned in another one of my videos, in the state of California, your landlord has 21 days to give you back your security deposit. You know from my landlord's past behavior that he clearly was never going to give Fred back his security deposit right away. Also, Fred had not been paying his rent on time for like months and months and months at that point. So I can only imagine my landlord was in no rush to give Fred back his security deposit. Additionally, Fred was supposed to be out of the apartment on the 1st. He was not out of the apartment until the 6th, which again, now makes a lot of sense to me because remember how I was like, why wouldn't he have just extended until like the 8th or whatever? But he couldn't extend to the 8th because he was asked to leave. And I'm sorry, but it is not my fault that you are now homeless. It is not my fault that you decided to come back on property after you were told not to. And it is not my fault that our landlord is withholding your security deposit. That's your fault, his fault. And in full transparency, I did tell landlord about this, but Steve actually told him first. I told landlord about hearing Fred in there, like I think a day after Steve told him about it. But okay, this is a really long video and I'm about to get cut off. So more to come.